Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you attending anywhere on Earth. Welcome to Day 2 of SCAD GamingFest 2022. I'm Sue-Ann Fu, the Chair of Interactive Design and Game Development, and I'm honored to moderate this conversation because it personally hits home. The making of sessions has become a pivotal part of GamingFest because it celebrates the artistic approach of our students and graduate game production. With over 160 game companies in Georgia alone, SCAD is uniquely located to find opportunities for our students to turn their gaming passions into great careers. From freelancing at startups to executive leadership at gaming giants like Apple, we take pride in the success of our students within the classroom and beyond, and our next guests are no exception. I'd love to welcome our fellow Bs, Nathaniel Cartwright, who is the project lead for Home is Where the Hearth is, and James Hill, who is the technical direction lead. We will also be including illustrious panelist faculty, James Mamias, who has experience with renowned companies such as Crytek and Activision. So let's give a hearty welcome to the making of Home is Where the Hearth is.
All right.
At this moment, we would love to also give a special treat for all of you and show you exactly what Home is Where the Hearth is looks like with a trailer reel.
You there. What are you doing here? This is no place for a human.
Thank you so much for coming to see the making of Home is Where the Hearth is. Hi. I would like to thank Sue-Ann and Jack for giving us that great introduction. My name is James Hill. I am the technical lead of the project. I handled programming, visual effects, and sound implementation. And with me today is our project lead.
Hi there, I'm Nathaniel Cartwright. I served as project lead and narrative designer. I was responsible for team management, production, all narrative and writing related tasks, as well as voice work and implementation. James is going to begin for us by giving a quick introduction for the rest of our team.
So our team consisted of 6 people for the people in the class, Amanda Wood, Dylan Porter, Scarlett Blackwell, and Mei Lee Ho, who were all instrumental in making this game come to life. They handled most of the art, and Scarlett was great for system designing and allowing us to really bring the gameplay to life. And we really couldn't have made it all happen too without the outside help that was able to cover the places that we were weak, like with animation and UI art. And our storyboard artist was great to help us with all the cinematic things. And we had to do all of this during the global pandemic. So as soon as we started this, we had to start this from a online class with Studio 2. That was our first quarter entirely remote. That we had only a couple of us that were actually able to get together at any given time. And especially when we moved into the second quarter of Studio 3, when we had the hybrid classes, some of us had already left Savannah, and we were only able to get 4 people out of the 6 into the actual classroom. Our ability to collaborate was impacted, but it didn't stop us. The great thing about the pandemic was that there was a lot of upsurge in the online collaborative experience, and with things like Zoom and Discord to help us communicate, and Perforce to help us keep version control under wraps, and make it so that like we can actually work together in a way that's not destructive. So pre-production is where we got everything going. The juicy bits like the pitch documents and the naming convention spreadsheets, all the things people love to see. We took our time to write down our ideas and get solid documents so that we knew what each system was supposed to be doing, and we could go back and reference it instead of having to ask questions over and over again. But the great thing about these being in something like Google Docs, something that was easily editable by everyone, if something needed to be changed, then we could do it on the fly. And it meant that anyone who had confusion could go back to the guide to know exactly what they had to do. But a lot of the pre-production actually started before Studio 2, and I'm going to hand it off to Nathan to talk about the development and the initial game design document.
Thank you, James. So the earliest concepts for Home is Where the Hearth is comes from a game pitch document written for one of the earlier classes, Intro to Game Development, which I took in the winter quarter of 2019 with Amanda Wood and Dylan Porter, who were also joined us in these classes for the capstone. In its first iteration, Home is Where the Hearth is was a game meant to blend city building, resource management, and isometric fantasy RPG elements into a story-driven, single-player experience that rewarded and respected player choices. While many of these ideas, mechanics, and features were changed or removed altogether as time progressed, these pillars of strong narrative and player freedom remained foundational to our approach of making this game a reality. As a game pitch document, those original designs were not created with the full intent of seeing actual development. It was very much a practice leading up to the more serious projects. So scope was one of the first issues that needed to be addressed in order to make Home is Where the Hearth is a functioning game. As my primary project for Studio 1, the class that precedes the capstone, which I took in the fall of 2020, I took it upon myself to expand the original pitch document and create a fully fleshed out game design document that will become the basis for the game and our capstone project to be developed over 2 10-week quarters. Many mechanics, designs, and features were cut, as I said, to improve feasibility in that time frame. We were also able to add things, and a lot of that went back and forth as time went on. James is going to go into greater detail on the development processes and philosophies we employed there.
So as the project grew, things weren't working quite like we planned. We started to see how the game felt, and that some areas where our skills grew as artists, and the quality started to shift. So the great thing about what we were taught at SCAD and how we approached this project is we were using the agile workflow that let us take a step back at frequent points and look at what was working and what wasn't, which allowed us to iterate and more regularly see the problems that were coming up and address them before they became unmanageable. The thing that ended up changing the least was the level design, but everything had to go through an overhaul, even in there, as we added new zones and new mechanics to bring life to the world. The great thing about all of us being able to work together and side by side is that, like, with something like Agile, we can see the process all together and be able to make sure that it gets unified.
Yeah. Having a well-written and impactful narrative was one of our highest priorities throughout development. Blending story, gameplay, and art style was critical to achieving the look and feel that we wanted for the game. We selected a naturalistic color palette that mixed warm and cool colors to accentuate the wonderful hand-painted environments our artists created for the player to explore, collect, and fight within. These features, in combination with our resource collection and management mechanics, reinforce the most foundational question posed by the narrative. What makes the place you live a home, and what is that worth to you? So, Home is Where the Hearth Is features a branching narrative with paths determined by the player's choices, making sure that their actions mattered. You play as Aiden, a young woman who has traveled in search of a fresh start. She happens upon an empty wilderness, perfect for her needs, the hinterlands. But as she settles down and begins to explore this new world around her, she learns that the land isn't quite as empty as she first thought. She must ask herself her true intentions and whether she can dwell in these hinterlands in harmony with the environment, or if the land is no more than a resource to be used. The NPC Ithrin, which you can see in the middle here, is an old hermit who has lived within the hinterlands for many years, and he serves as the primary vehicle for this information, with different responses dependent on how the player speaks to him. And
Sorry.
that's it. I believe,
Oh,
yes.
that was it.
Yes. Had to cut it a bit short, but thank you for listening to our presentation today. I believe we will now be moving on to a short Q&A portion of the panel with questions provided by our lovely moderator.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Nathan, for giving us an overview of Home is Where the Hearth Is. At this point, I'd love to ask a little bit more about the development and the process. So just feel free to, I'm not going to direct any specific panelists for any of the questions. I'm going to open it all to all of you. And Jack, actually, since you're joining in, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit more? Because I did not get a chance to talk about your background as much.
I'm Professor Jack Lamias, and I've been teaching at SCAD since 2009. Like Suen said, I've been in the industry for about 25 years, mostly doing AAA games, and I've now got an indie studio, and I'm making a hardcore space sim.
Excellent. Thank you, Jack. So Professor Mamias is one of the faculty and the leading faculty for the development of Home is Where the Hearth Is. And let's actually just talk about that experience. So particularly for James and Nathan, what was the best part of the experience for developing Home is Where the Hearth Is?
I can go first.
Yes, please.
What I really loved about Home is Where the Hearth Is, and this really kind of speaks to SCAD's approach to the curriculum and teaching the students, is how much effort was put into mimicking a real industry environment, trying to teach us before we ever set foot outside of SCAD what it'll be like to go down this career path for real.
And I think that my favorite part was probably being able to actually put out a finished product. Like we worked so hard to for over the 6 months to like put together something that could actually be played, and that was something that you could really like sink your teeth into. And it was probably the first like truly finished product that I was able to put out after all of my time at SCAD, and I was so excited to be able to do it.
One of the amazing things is that with these student projects and collaboration, we're seeing the multi-talents from artists to programmers and technical leads like yourself. You've seen other projects. Where does it stand on your expectations when you started developing Home is Where the Hearth Is to where it landed? Was it like right from the beginning, wow, we got something special right here? Or it's like it developed over time? It's like, wow, look at all the talent coming in and how we've progressed and created something special.
I think it really developed over time. Like the original game design document, like really outlined the world and everything. But as far as the tech involved in the actual game design and like the actual like gameplay, that was iterated on heavily. Like we had to keep going back to it and keep going back to it, and especially again, like as I said in the presentation, like we grew as artists during that 6 months. Like you would see like something that looked amazing, and then something that was just like, oh well, I can tell that I made this 6 months ago. and we had to keep going back and like, okay, well, to keep it as a unified project and something that actually like holds up to the quality that we expect, we need to keep going back to it and keep changing.
Yeah, I can see that in the really wonderful competition nature and the cooperative nature that I see in SCAD student collaborative productions. Jack, my next question is to you. You've seen probably, I don't know, hundreds of projects being produced during your time here
Literally.
at SCAD. And just to go on to some of the challenges, could you name one of the challenges that you saw either during the development of Home is Where the Hearth is, or how was that experience for you, either through teaching or either through the development with the students?
This project was really interesting because we had a couple of, Amanda was a really, really good artist. Her and Nathan had worked on a previous project along with us, Zoe Lee, that was a really, really advanced project, and it had a lot of advanced art. And it was a big art team of about 40 people, as opposed to this was an art team of 2 people or 3 people. And they were already sort of veterans at making games because this team had done a lot of game jam games too. So that's probably what, your 4th game or 5th game. I mean, you guys are
Like
just
that.
knocking stuff out, right? So you got a lot of experience making the games, which was great. And when you came in, you were really pumped about making something, not just a game that looked good, but a game that actually played good. And literally, this is probably one of the longer games, even though it looks really good. I mean, the art is some of the best art that we've seen in games at SCAD. The gameplay is maybe 10 hours of gameplay in this sucker. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? Where usually SCAD games are like maybe 30 minutes to an hour. It's more like they're more like glorified demos than actual games. This is a real game, and that surprised me. Early on, definitely we were looking for an aspect of the game that wasn't, okay, this is like a Diablo clone, right? Because you're going to be compared to something that's a 3/4 action-based RPG, and obviously you're going to be compared to Diablo. But you guys took a lot of pains to make sure that it had its own unique voice, with the hearth mechanic, which is the key to the game. Which, as the game progresses and the hearth grows, the little girl's power grows, and she's able to go farther out into this mysterious forest, to where she can actually go into an underground tomb, which is actually a scary area, right? And much different than some of the areas, the earlier areas, which are like forest areas. And it had a really good sense of progression. Did a good job writing the game, Nathan. Certainly, it's got some very good narrative, and you did most of the voices too, which is good. And James just came together. James is like an artist, tech art, but he did most of the programming, I think, right? So you kind of knocked everything together, and you guys were truly indie developers that you kind of put everything together, and you were able to make this magnificent project that it certainly has won the IntelliKey Awards for us at SCAD. I think we're going to enter into a few other things, and I'm real excited to be able to put it on Steam so everybody can play it, because usually these games just exist on some hard drive I have somewhere and I have to dig them up. Now it'll be on Steam forever. It's great.
We'll give more information of how our audience can experience it later on. But I remember, Jack, when you said it was hours of play, I didn't realize it was 10 hours of play. So definitely
more.
It's a great way to experience what our students can do, particularly from the design side to the full immersive experience of the game itself. Same question actually to you, Nathan. What were some of the challenges that you felt like there was during development?
Well, I think the greatest hurdle that we did overcome, but at least at the beginning presented quite a big question, was the remote side of things. For most of the years that I attended SCAD, being able to work in person with people at Montgomery Hall was very much a strength of the experience and getting to learn how the industry operates. And so this was quite a dramatic shift. But in spite of that, as we said a little bit before, we really were able to come together otherwise through like Zoom and Discord. And with the version control software, really get that replication of working all together at the same time.
Thank goodness for Discord. Saved us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's very interesting that you're mentioning that, Nathan. I think one of the aspects that we're seeing is that through the pandemic, even though our last making of is also through a development through the pandemic, we're seeing it evolve. Where, especially this year, remote development has really become a little bit more stable as studios are also stabilized on the way of development through communication tools like Discord and using Perforce and such. So it's amazing to see and hear you mentioning where it, at the academic side, we had the same hurdles. I think that's one of the aspects that I'm very proud of, to see, the students really being able to get together and just really thrive and overcome some of these problems. James, my next question is going to be towards you. If you could change one thing about what you did throughout the design or the game itself, whether it's a soft aspect of working with the team to the game itself, what would you change?
Honestly, the thing that I would change the most is probably making the code base a little bit more organized. Especially because I had to work with so many different aspects, and then like trying to implement them got a bit messy, to say the least. And it's the thing that I would like to go back and touch up is really make it like a more efficient game. It works pretty well, but I would like it to be more efficient.
It's every problem in every game. Just so you know.
Hindsight is 2020. I'm sure that, as Jack has mentioned, developing multiple games each time, especially as a student and growing, and from game jam to creating Home is Where the Hearth is, you're learning new ways to be more efficient and new ways to think about how to approach game development. So same question to you, Nathan. What other aspects what would you change?
Actually, much within the same line. So I was in charge of writing and then implementing all of the dialogue in the game. And I ended up doing that entire process 3 times. And it wasn't until the 3rd time that we had a robust and intuitive system by which to do it. And so I think, were I to do this again, I would have put a lot more effort early on into finding those systems and plugins that would enable myself to be able to do that a lot easier.
Well, sorry.
I'd like to add to that just a little bit. Middleware is your friend. I did a lot of the sound implementation, and I used Fmod for that, and I got into that very early. And even though it was a learning curve for that program, it saved so much time down the line to just like have something that was built for that you don't have to build bespoke, because at the end of the day you don't have a lot of time. So don't go out there trying to build bespoke options when you have so much available to you already. So it's great if you have like these edge cases, but people have built these things to be used.
Yeah,
use them.
Yeah.
Great advice, James.
Yeah, it's like buying a paintbrush, right? I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You want to buy a special paintbrush for a special job, and you're gonna go out. You're not gonna make the paintbrush. You're gonna
exactly.
Somebody's gonna do a better job than you with that paintbrush.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a creative, because the entire community is helping each other with not only tools but better ways to create. So I'm glad that you brought that up, James, and Jack, thank you for that as well. Nathan, you just brought up narrative design, and I think a lot of our audience is interested in that particular aspect. So I'm going to go back and talk about your decisions for that. Why did you decide to create a branching narrative for your game instead of a linear one?
That had a lot to do with the medium. A peer of mine many years ago, his name escapes me, was apparently of the opinion that choices in games weren't particularly important. And I carried that with me for a while, and I really have to see it the other way, because games are the one entertainment form that you really have that opportunity to change things. In the movies, if you got to see the Lord of the Rings in theaters, your decision to bring popcorn or candy into the theater doesn't help Frodo get to Mordor. But in games, your choices do have the opportunity and the power to change the direction that the game takes, mostly in narrative ways, but it can also be mechanically as well. And I think that that's what sets video games, or games in general, apart from every other medium. That's the true power of them, being able to put the audience into it and let them have a say in what happens.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really great bonuses of, when you play Home is Where the Hearth is, because of the branching narrative. It's so rich in content that you can really explore and really get into the entire world. I'm going to ask one final thought from each of the panelists of, having gone through the development several times. So from the faculty perspective, as well as the student developer perspective, what is the 1 to 2 sentence or 1 to 3 sentence advice you would give a new student that's coming in on your experience from this development, and have them take it to the next step when they're going to be starting their journey on as developers as well? So I'll start with James.
So I guess for me, the biggest piece of advice is critique is going to hurt, but it 9 times out of 10, if somebody says that something isn't working, even if they can't tell you what it is, you should probably listen to them, because it's probably not working.
And it's probably coming from Jack, so.
Yeah. So make sure to listen to the people who are actually playing and experiencing your content, because that's going to be the thing. And those are going to be the people who really know. You who is looking at it every day will know much less than you think you do.
Okay. Jack, do you have a quick 1 sentence as well?
Bring your passion to the game. That's it. You do make something that you love to do, because you're going to see a lot of it. So stick with it. And I always like science fiction, so all my games are sci-fi.
That we know. Nathan, you are coming in with our last takeaways for the audience. Would you mind also giving us a quick tip?
Yeah. So as kind of a narrative-focused designer, never stop writing. Read and write. The more that you take in from any kind of perspective, for the things that people like in stories, the things people don't like, and putting that into your own, and just practice. That goes for every focus, but really with writing, because it's something that is seen outside of games all the time. Practice makes perfect, and so just keep at it, and you'll get to where you want to go.
Brilliant, great advice. Unfortunately, that is all our time that we have today. So I want to thank you all for being our illustrious panelists over here and giving us a great behind the scenes for your creative process. Home is Where the Hearth is going to be available for download on SCAD Game Studio on Steam. So please go on to Steam and look us up, and we will be able to give you updates on when you can be able to download this wonderful game and experience it yourself. So if you haven't done so already, I hope you're making your way to Trustees Theater or Locked In virtually, because we're showing the screening of Uncharted next. A post-screening discussion will also follow at 2 p.m. So please join us and stay tuned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.